In a world where magic had long ceased to amaze anyone, and beast contracts were considered an ordinary trade, Seiji Kuruma was the kind of person no one bet on. He was not an academy genius, not the son of a noble clan, and did not wield a sword well enough for songs to be written about him. He was a quiet young man with stubborn eyes and a strange habit of taking in sick, abandoned, or overly weak animals. His life changed on the day when, during the awakening test, he received a skill that others would have considered useless. The skill was simply called evolution. At first, even the teachers did not understand what was special about it. Well, yes, it could strengthen animals, but how far? And why was that needed if it was easier to buy a ready-made combat beast? At the academy, they laughed at Seiji. His classmates considered him a farmer with a fancy title. In response, he merely remained silent and looked at the small white chicken he had found in the school's backyard. This chicken was ordinary. Weak, stupid, timid. Seiji gave it grain, cleaned the dirt from its foot, made it run in circles, and sent a weak stream of energy into its body through his skill. The next morning, it already looked different. Its feathers became denser, its eyes sharper, its movements quicker. A week later, it was no longer just a chicken. It was a fire chicken, then a bird capable of breathing heat, and then a phoenix chicken, a fiery beast that not only did not die from wounds but was reborn from the ashes. And then Seiji understood for the first time. His skill did not simply strengthen. It guided an animal along the path of evolution if it was properly fed, trained, and its development was correctly directed. From that moment, everything changed. Seiji did not like noisy victories. He liked precision. Therefore, he did not immediately run to tell the world about his skill. First, he tested it in silence. He took an old chicken from a farmyard that no one needed and began experimenting. Food, training, a brief flash of energy through the skill, then rest, then food again, movement again, development again. At first, the ordinary chicken became more resilient. Then it learned to withstand heat. Then it began pecking so quickly that it split small stones. And then, one day, its feathers flared with red light. Seiji squatted in the dusty barn and watched the fiery bird breathing before him. "So it is possible to go further," he said quietly. And he did. He increased the workload, gave it special food, and began mixing rare minerals and heat-resistant herbs into its diet. A month later, the chicken no longer resembled an ordinary bird. Its wings became longer, its feathers like blades of light, and a flame lived inside it. When the barn caught fire from a single sneeze, Seiji understood two things. First, the skill truly worked on any animal. Second, he had just created a creature that needed to be kept under control. That was how his first combat beast was born. It was then that he began thinking not like a student, but like a person who would one day build an entire farm of miraculous creatures. The world in which Seiji lived was cruel to those who did not fit into the common system. Large guilds bought strong beasts from breeders. Wealthy clans maintained their own kennels. Adventurers took contracts to kill monsters, not to raise them from an egg into a legend. Farmers received little respect. Those who tried to work with animals were considered simple country folk. That was why Seiji understood. If he revealed his secret too early, everything would be taken from him. His skill was too dangerous. It could turn an ordinary animal into something unique. A dog into a guardian beast, a goat into a mountain titan, a duck into a flying scout, a rabbit into a lightning-fast killer, a cow into a source of milk that healed wounds, a horse into a battle steed capable of running across stone as if it were water. But most importantly, Seiji could bring any creature to its maximum evolutionary form if he understood its path. In other words, a chicken could become a phoenix, a dog, a guardian spirit, a wolf, a lunar predator, a pig, an armored digger, a deer, a forest king. And even a simple domestic bird could one day grow into a legend. He decided to act quietly. At first, he began taking small jobs, guarding villages, delivering herbs, caring for livestock. With the money, he bought feed, minerals, and simple plots of land outside the city. No one understood why this young man was so stubbornly buying old plots, abandoned barns and fields where nothing had grown for a long time. But he could already see his future there. A farm, but not an ordinary one. A farm where every creature would not be a product, but a future source of power. The next animal was a dog. Not purebred, not strong, but an old mongrel with a torn ear that Seiji picked up on the outskirts of the market. It growled at everyone except him. Apparently, it sensed that he had no desire to inflict pain for pleasure. He named it Crow. At first, Crow could barely walk. Then, after several weeks of training, he became faster. After that, Seiji began giving him a special diet, meat mixed with herbs that enhanced reaction speed and endurance. Then came the first evolutionary impulse. His fur darkened. His paws became more powerful, his jaw stronger. After the second stage, Crow could already tear apart wooden targets. After the third, he could read a person's intentions from the movement of their shoulders. After the fourth, he disappeared into the shadows so quickly that he seemed like a ghost. Seiji understood. His skill did not simply improve physical abilities. It developed instincts, intelligence, and tactical thinking. This was important, because a strong animal is a weapon. An intelligent, evolved animal is already a strategist. And one day, such a weapon saved his life. On his way back from the city, Seiji was attacked by two debt collectors. They thought they were facing an ordinary young man with a chicken and a dog. They were wrong. Crow lunged forward and knocked one of them into the mud, while the second did not even have time to draw his knife. The phoenix chicken flared above Seiji's shoulder and struck with a wave of fire, forcing the attacker to retreat in terror. After that, Seiji noticed for the first time how people in the city began taking an interest in his silence. And silence, as everyone knows, always attracts those who know how to count money. Seiji quickly understood. Strength was good. But building an evolution farm required resources. A lot of resources. Land was needed, feed was needed, pens were needed, special magical seals for stabilizing beasts were needed, veterinarians, alchemists, trainers, water suppliers, and so on were needed, and that meant he needed money. He started with contracts. At first, adventurers hired his animals for minor assignments. The fire chicken burned dense vegetation in swamps. Crow accompanied caravans and sensed ambushes in advance. A rabbit, which he also evolved later, could search for rare mushrooms underground and find herbs that other beasts failed to notice. People were amazed. Why are your beasts so useful? Why do they not lose control? Why do they obey you? Seiji answered briefly, because I do not use them. I develop them. It was not simply a philosophy. It was his principle. Gradually, people began talking about him. Not as a fighter, not as a mage, but as a strange young man who could turn ordinary beasts into something impossible. That was how he accumulated his first large sum of money. And then he bought land. His first farm looked ridiculous. An old plot outside the city, a half-rotten barn, soil that had long been scorched and impoverished. One well, several crooked fences. The neighbors laughed. He bought this dump. What is he planning to grow there? Potatoes for chickens? Seiji did not argue. He simply began working. First, he restored the land, magically enriched the soil, changed the composition of the water, cleaned out old pits, and built new pens with protective runes. Then he brought in the first animals, not elite ones, but ordinary, cheap creatures that no one needed. This was the main secret of his business. He did not search for perfect beasts. He made perfect those whom everyone else had already discarded. Chickens, rabbits, dogs, goats, ducks, sheep, horses, cats. Even donkeys, which the workers laughed at, could transform into incredibly resilient pack beasts. Seiji understood. Value was not in the breed, but in the path. The farm began to grow, first as a strange legend, then as a rare supplier, and then as a place where adventurers began coming with requests. Give us a beast for a mission. Do you have anything against swamp creatures? We need a scout for dungeons. Is there a beast capable of carrying a group of people through the snow? And every time Seiji answered, there is, if you are willing to pay and treat it as a partner. It was then that he came up with his real business. Not selling, not a permanent contract, not selling living power into slavery, but renting evolved animals. It was revolutionary. Many guilds were accustomed to buying beasts and squeezing everything out of them until the end. Seiji offered something different. You take a beast on a mission, the beast returns unharmed. Payment is made for use, not ownership. If the assignment is difficult, he selects an animal for the specific task. For swamps, a beast resistant to poison. For snowy peaks, a beast that warms the body with air. For reconnaissance, a bird that sees in the dark. For hunting monsters, a dog that senses an enemy's weak points. For delivering cargo, a beast capable of running for an entire day without stopping. At first, the guilds did not believe him. Then they laughed, then they tried it, and realized that renting from Seiji was cheaper than buying an elite beast, while his animals were sometimes even more reliable. That was how a real market began forming around his farm. But a market attracts more than just customers. It also attracts those who want to take another person's miracle. One night, the farm was attacked. Not by monsters, not by bandits, by people from a rival beast guild. They thought Seiji was merely a farmer, that if they burned part of the pens and stole several beasts, his business would collapse. They came quietly, with masks, lockpicks, and enchanted nets. But they did not know one thing. Evolved animals sense danger before people do. Crow was the first to raise the alarm. Then the phoenix chicken rose into the air and illuminated the yard with a circle of fire. Then a goat, which Seiji had recently raised to the mountain level, simply crashed into the fence, sweeping away 2 raiders. And the scout duck shrieked so loudly that the attacker's ears became blocked. Seiji came out of the house without panic. He did not shout. He did not rush around. He simply said, "Wrong farm," and activated his skill on a grown box containing young beasts. In a single night, he showed that his farm was not merely a business, but a fortress. By morning, everyone knew about the attack. And after that, people began looking at his property differently. The main feature of Seiji's skill was that it had no upper limit in the usual sense. If an animal passed through the correct stages of development, training, and feeding, it could reach the maximum form of its branch, and sometimes even go beyond it. Seiji discovered that evolution followed the principle of a chain. Ordinary form, to enhanced form, to rare form, to mythical form, to maximum of the branch to unique apex type. For example, ordinary chicken to fire chicken to phoenix to solar phoenix, ordinary dog to guardian to shadow hunter to royal beast, ordinary goat to mountain ram to earth, titan to stone, guardian ordinary rabbit to fast rabbit to lightning hare to spatial runner, ordinary duck to water scout to storm duck to celestial navigator. Seiji was amazed that every branch had its own peak. And if it was approached correctly, it was possible to obtain a creature of incredible power. That was what made his farm legendary. He did not create monsters. He created potential brought to completion. When the major beast guilds realized that Seiji had become too influential, they tried to push him out of the market. At a city meeting, he was publicly accused of unnatural interference in the world of beasts, destroying traditions, and creating a dangerous monopoly. Seiji came alone. Opposite him sat 3 guild leaders, several masters, and representatives of the city council. "You are destroying the market," said the eldest of them. "I am changing it," Seiji replied. "Your beasts are too strong. Strength should be useful, not merely expensive. You are competing with us." Seiji looked directly at them. "No, I offer what you cannot provide: trust, safety, and repeatability of results." They tried to humiliate him with questions about the origin of his skill, but Seiji did not give in. In response, he simply summoned his best beast onto the grounds, and Eagle evolved into a celestial scout. She flew over the hall so low that she knocked dust and feathers from the shoulders of several guards. Then Seiji showed them rental contracts, reports on completed missions, and a list of people who had returned alive thanks to his beasts. There was nothing left to say. People began to understand that he was not destroying the market. He was creating a new one. After that, Seiji's farm gained true fame. People began coming to the city: monster hunters, caravan traders, underground cartographers, research mages, village elders, seekers of rare plants, even minor aristocrats. And all of them had the same problem. They needed a beast for a short time, but they could not or did not want to buy an elite one. Seiji offered a solution. He built a system: consultation, animal selection, brief training for the task, rental contract return, and repeated evaluation bonuses for careful treatment. Thus, his farm became not only an agricultural operation, but also a service center for living magic. It was then that he first did what would later be called a brilliant move. He created specialized evolutionary lines for specific professions. For example, combat chickens for dungeons, healing sheep for field hospitals, scout ducks for rivers and swamps, cargo boars for distant expeditions, snow dogs for mountain missions, aerial hawks for messages. The farm began making money faster than he had expected, and that meant only one thing. It was time to think about expansion. Seiji understood that his farm could not remain an ordinary plot of land. If he truly wanted to raise maximum forms, he needed a special territory, with magical springs, different climate zones, separate enclosures, and an entire network of training grounds. In other words, a small kingdom of evolution. He bought more land, then more. Then he added an old forest plot. Then he bought an abandoned quarry. Then he restored a pond. Then he built a fire enclosure for phoenix-like birds. The soil on his territory began to change. What had once been merely a farm became a living system. Predators and herbivores placed in balance, feeding cycles, magical resting fields, evolutionary grounds, water reservoirs, a snowy zone for cold species, a fire terrace for fiery forms. Seiji gave the place a simple name: Maximum Farm. From that moment, it became clear he was not building an agricultural operation. He was building a school for the development of life. The most difficult project was the phoenix chicken. It was no longer simply a bird. It became proud, unruly, and so sensitive to magic that any disruption of order caused bursts of heat. Seiji found it difficult to keep it under control, but it was this beast that gave him his first truly legendary result. After long months of feeding, training, purification, and magical balancing, the chicken passed through its final stage. Its plumage flared gold, its eyes became amber, its wings spread like a small sun. And before everyone's eyes, it rose into the air and performed the ancient cycle of death and rebirth in flames that did not destroy, but purified. What stood before Seiji was no longer a phoenix. It was a solar phoenix, a beast capable not only of flying and attacking, but also of healing allies with the heat of rebirth. When the guild representatives saw this, they fell silent. Because for the first time, they understood. Seiji's skill was not merely useful. It was capable of changing the balance of the world. The world does not leave such powers unnoticed. Soon, one of the major adventuring teams asked Seiji to help hunt an underground titan, a monster that several groups in a row had failed to defeat. He agreed, but not as a warrior, as a supplier. He issued them beasts for the mission: Crow as the forward scout, a hawk for aerial surveillance, 2 armored goats for the assault, and 1 phoenix chick as a reserve source of support. The group laughed, until they saw the result. Seiji's beasts did not simply attack, they adapted. Crow found the Titan's weak points. The goats broke stone outcroppings. The hawk warned them about traps. The phoenix chick released waves of heat that did not kill allies, but burned away the monster's dark slime. It was not simply a rental, it was a tactical advantage. And after that mission, Maximum Farm was no longer discussed as a curiosity, but as a new power in the world of adventurers. When you have a miracle, a black market appears as well. One day, Seiji learned that someone was trying to buy up his inexpensive contracts and resell information about the beast's routes. Worse still, ordinary animals similar in type to his early evolutionary lines began disappearing. Someone was trying to repeat his method, but without understanding it. Seiji did not wait. He sent Crow, the phoenix, and the hawk to track the trail. They led him to a secret warehouse outside the city, where stolen beasts were being held and people were trying to improve them forcibly with cheap magic. Seiji saw there what he hated most of all: sick animals being broken for profit. And then for the first time, he became truly angry. The phoenix's flames burned through the locks. Crow tore apart the chains. The goats smashed through the gates. And Seiji himself, with a cold expression, said to the people from the black market, "You do not know how to develop life. You only know how to ruin it." And this time, he did not limit himself to a warning. He destroyed their entire network. After that, Seiji was no longer merely a farmer. People spoke of him as a man who makes ordinary miracles systematic, turns the weak into something useful, creates living technology, and runs an entire beast business without slavery or cruelty. Some began calling him the Master of Evolution, others the Farmer of Legends. Still others simply the young man whose chicken was more dangerous than a knight. And this only increased the flow of customers. But along with fame came the greatest problem. Power on an imperial scale began taking an interest in his farm. And when the authorities take too close an interest in something, it rarely ends well. One day, an inspection unit from the capital arrived at the farm, officially to inspect tax documents and licenses for magical animals, in reality to assess whether Seiji posed a threat. The unit was led by a lady master with a cold gaze and the seal of imperial supervision. "Mr. Kuruma," she said, looking around the pens, "you have grown too quickly." Seiji bowed politely. "I try to feed my animals well." She did not smile. "Your chickens are reborn from fire. Your dogs develop like assassin hunters. Your goats break stone. This is no longer a farm. It is a strategic resource. And what if I say it is simply good care? Then I will say that you are either a genius or a dangerous liar." Seiji looked at her calmly. "And what if I say that my animals help people and do not go to war without reason?" She fell silent, because the reports truly said exactly that. He was not a tyrant. He was not a monopolist. He was not a madman. He had simply understood too well how to cultivate power without destruction. And that was precisely what made him even more dangerous to those accustomed to control. The Empire tried to offer Seiji cooperation. They wanted taxes, reports, supplies, and a share of control. He agreed, but on his own terms. "I will give you access to some of the animals," he said during the negotiations, "but only through rental. Only with their return. Only if the beast does not suffer. Only if you sign a code of humane treatment." The officials exchanged glances. "And if we refuse?" one asked. Seiji smiled for the first time during the entire conversation. "Then you will remain without what you already wanted to take." It was not a challenge for the sake of challenging them. It was a business strike. And the Empire accepted his rules because the results were too good to refuse. Over time, Maximum Farm became the largest animal evolution center in the region. Seiji opened research stalls, training grounds, fire and water zones, divided nests for birds, courses for renters, a mission recommendation system, and a special evolutionary catalog containing already tested development branches. Now any person could come and choose not simply a beast, but a path. Want a scout? Take a bird. Want a tank? Take a goat. Want support? Take a sheep. Want ranged combat? Take a duck. Want a universal companion? Take a dog. Want a miracle? Start with a chicken. And most importantly, the customers began to understand. Seiji's beasts were not only strong, they also changed the people who worked with them. Adventurers returned from missions alive. Caravans became safer, villages richer, and beast magic more honest. Later, people would tell their children that it had all begun with a single chicken. Ordinary, ridiculous, needed by no one. But Seiji knew the truth. Strength is not born from greatness. It is born from proper care, proper struggle, and the proper understanding that even the weakest creature is capable of becoming a legend if it is given a path. And that was exactly what he did again and again. He did not simply feed beasts, he raised the future. By the time Seiji Kuruma was being discussed even in the capital's corridors, his Maximum Farm had already ceased to be merely a strange agricultural operation on the outskirts. It had become something that could not be ignored. His beasts won missions. His rentals were cheaper and more effective than buying rare combat pets. His customers returned alive. And what was even worse for his competitors, they returned satisfied. And a satisfied customer is always more frightening than a deceived one. But it was at this moment that Seiji understood. If he remained merely a supplier, they would still try to break him. An overly profitable business always provokes either greed or fear. That meant it was necessary to take the next step. Not simply a farm, not simply rentals, but a complete system of evolutionary contracts. He began by introducing 3 levels of access: basic rentable beast enhanced contract with a trainer elite development route tailored to the customer's task. It looked reasonable, but in reality it changed the entire market. Now, people did not simply come to take a beast, they came for a result. And if they needed to pay more for it, they paid. The competitors understood this almost immediately. And that meant war was inevitable. His name was Hander Vale. Officially, he was the head of an old and respected beast guild in the capital district. Unofficially, he was the man who had controlled the market for combat beasts, contracted pets, and the supply of beast eggs across half the kingdom for 10 consecutive years. He was old, cunning, and extremely dangerous in negotiations. Hander did not send Seiji direct threats. He acted more cleverly. First, he began luring away customers. Then he spread rumors that the beasts from Maximum Farm were too unstable. Then he bribed several minor adventurers to deliberately mistreat the rented animals and return them in poor condition. Seiji quickly understood which way the wind was blowing. And then, for the first time, he personally traveled to the capital. Not with an army, not with guards. Only with Crow, the Phoenix, and a couple of documents. They were admitted to the meeting reluctantly. The guild hall was enormous, golden, gleaming like a place where people loved to display their status. Hander sat on a raised platform and looked at Seiji as though he had already lost. "So you are that farmer," he said. Too much noise for such a small enterprise. Seiji calmly placed a folder of contracts on the table. "And you are the man who believes that the beast market belongs to one house?" Hander smirked. "The market belongs to those who know how to control it." "Then you have already lost," Seiji replied, "because you control through fear, and I through development." The hall fell silent. Hander leaned back against the throne. "You are too self-confident." "No," Seiji said. "I simply already see what you have not yet understood. Your customers do not want your name. They want a beast that will not let them down." And he gave a signal. The phoenix rose above his shoulder and spread its wings. Soft golden flames flared throughout the hall, harmless to people but bright enough for everyone to see. Before them was not an ordinary pet, but a living miracle. Hander understood that Seiji could not be defeated through direct pressure. Then he made his second move. He issued a public challenge. 3 days later, a combat beast exhibition was to take place in the city arena. Guilds competed in demonstrating the strength of their contracted beasts, and the winner received the most profitable government orders for the following season. Hander intended to humiliate Seiji before the capital's aristocrats and officially destroy his reputation. Seiji accepted the challenge, but not on the terms they expected. "I will not simply show a beast," he said at the organizers' meeting. "I will show a path." The organizers were bewildered. What kind of path? Seiji smiled. From an ordinary animal to a legend. It sounded almost insane. And that was exactly what turned the event into a sensation before it had even begun. On the day of the exhibition, the arena was packed to capacity. Noble houses occupied the best seats. The guilds came to watch the upstart fall, ordinary residents to watch the show, and Hander to see Seiji humiliated. Seiji brought neither the phoenix nor the dog into the arena. He brought out an ordinary white duck. The spectators giggled. Is this a joke? He came with a duck. What next, a carrot? Seiji did not react. He simply said, "Watch carefully," and began demonstrating evolution. First, the duck underwent an enhancement of its reaction speed, then endurance, then magical sensitivity, then aquatic adaptation and wind coordination. Before the crowd's eyes, the white duck transformed into a graceful beast with silvery blue wings. Then into a storm duck capable of flying through rain and fog as though through empty space. The crowd fell silent. And then Seiji brought it to the next stage. A powerful current of wind swept over the arena, and the bird turned in the air like a living compass needle. Its feathers began to resemble pieces of the sky. It could move through storms, see through fog, and find its direction in any tempest. It was no longer merely a beast, it was a celestial navigator. The hall erupted with shouts. Even the aristocrats jumped from their seats. Honder turned pale, because now the entire capital had seen Seiji could turn a ridiculous basic animal into a creature for which any caravan, army, or expedition would pay a fortune. And the show was only the beginning. The day after the exhibition, Maximum Farm became the main subject of discussion in the city. New customers appeared. New envious people appeared. New investors appeared. But most importantly, customers from dangerous zones appeared. People who needed beasts not for display, but for survival. And that was an entirely different level. Seiji began receiving offers from mountain expeditions, magical research units nobles, seeking ways to strengthen their personal guards trade caravans, traveling through deadly lands dungeon-clearing teams. He quickly understood that the time had come to expand the range. Not only birds, dogs, and goats, monsters were needed for special tasks. It was then that he began raising new branches: armored boars, shadow wolves, speed horses, sheep capable of producing healing wool burrowing beasts for searching for ore, and even pocket scouts for mage archaeologists. This was no longer merely farming. It was a service of the future. One day, a man in a black cloak came to Seiji, without a guild seal, without guards, without a name. He offered a contract to rescue an entire expedition trapped in ancient ruins. "We need beasts capable of entering a dungeon," he said. "Not merely fighters, we need adaptability, protection, reconnaissance, and, if possible, a beast that can sense traps." Seiji immediately understood this was not a simple matter. He asked, "Why not entrust this to an ordinary team?" The stranger replied, "Because 3 squads have already died there." It was exactly what Seiji needed. A difficult assignment, high risk, and a chance to prove that his animals worked not only on level ground. He chose 3. Crow as the forward scout, a mountain goat tank, and 1 new white fox recently raised to the shadow search stage. The fox was especially interesting. At first it had been an ordinary forest animal. Then it became quieter, more attentive, more intelligent. After several stages, it learned to see traps as distortions in the air. And then it transformed into a shadow guide, a creature capable of sensing hidden mechanisms and safe paths. The expedition returned alive. And after that, Seiji received not only payment, but also the unofficial status of someone worth hiring for the worst missions. The next major challenge came not from the city. In the east, within an old mountain range, a dungeon nicknamed Broken Stone opened. It appeared suddenly, as often happened with ancient magical rifts. Inside were monsters, traps, anomalous passages, and ancient mechanisms that could not be passed by an ordinary route. The guilds lost several groups there, and that was when they officially came for Seiji. The Imperial Administration, major adventure alliances, several mages, and even an inspector from the capital admitted it was better not to enter without his beasts. Seiji agreed, but before going, he prepared for a long time. He did not want to throw underdeveloped beasts into the dungeon. That would have been a betrayal of his principle. Therefore, an entire month was spent training the expeditionary force. Crow rose to the night pursuer stage. The goat became an armored Titan battering ram. The fox developed penetrating perception, the phoenix gained the form of a protective sun, and several new rabbits were brought to the lightning level. With such a team, Seiji entered the dungeon himself, and what happened there became a legend. Broken Stone was not merely a dungeon, it was a gigantic labyrinth of an ancient civilization with traps, moving walls, stone guardians, and systems that reacted to magic. The first team that entered returned without half its people. The second did not return at all. Seiji entered with an inner calm that he had not possessed at the beginning of his journey. He did not rush forward. He read the dungeon as a farmer reads a field. Where the ground was dangerous, where there was moisture, where there was a path, where there was rot. Crow walked ahead, sensing hidden threats. The fox stopped him before traps. The goat broke stone barriers. The phoenix illuminated the tunnels and burned poisonous spores. The rabbits found narrow passages and detours. When stone guardians burst from the walls, Seiji did not retreat. He gave a signal and his beasts worked as a single mechanism. It was not a squad. It was an evolutionary combat system. The accompanying people looked at it as though it were impossible. But Seiji knew, if animals were raised correctly, they could replace an entire part of a combat unit, especially in places where people were too slow or too greedy for risk. In the depths of the dungeon, they found an ancient altar, and more importantly, a core that strengthened the connection between evolution and the magical energy of the earth. This opened a new path for Seiji. Now he could develop beasts faster and even more precisely. But together with the discovery, another power awakened. Deep inside the dungeon lived neither a stone guardian nor an ordinary monster. An ancient beast connected to the rift slept there, an enormous predator, resembling a mixture of a lion and a snake, covered in obsidian plates. Its awakening began when Seiji activated the core, and then everything went according to no plan. The dungeon shook. Stones began falling from the ceiling. The guardians started awakening one after another, and from the depths came a roar that made blood run cold. "Are we leaving?" one of the adventurers shouted. Seiji looked at the beast, then at his animals, then at the corridor behind which the people stood, and answered, "No, we will finish this here." He began evolving the phoenix directly in battle. It was insanely risky, but he had no time. The fiery beast rose to a new stage of protective solar phoenix and tore upward a circle of fire that held back the darkness of the rift. Crow leaped onto the predator and distracted it. The goat brought down the side vault. The fox led the people into a safe passage. The rabbits severed the magical lines of the traps. Seiji himself stood before the monster, and for the first time, his evolution skill did not merely make a pet stronger, it gave an entire team a chance to survive a catastrophe. At the end of the battle, the ancient predator fell, and the dungeon began closing. Seiji emerged with dust on his face, burns on his sleeve, and a new level of reputation. Now he was feared no less than he was respected. After the dungeon, Seiji understood that his business had to become even more careful. If he continued working only as a farmer, they would forever try either to buy him or burn him. That meant he needed to establish himself officially. He proposed a new law to the city council. All rented beasts undergo inspection. All contracts are recorded in writing. The customer is responsible for humane treatment. Seiji provides insurance for the mission. Returning the animal after the assignment is mandatory. If the beast receives a serious injury through the customer's fault, the customer pays compensation. This changed the market completely. Some were pleased, others were outraged. Competitors shouted that he was strangling the old order, but ordinary people and guilds understood. It was fairer, safer, and more profitable. That was how Seiji became not merely a farmer and not merely an entrepreneur. He became the creator of a new industry. And then something happened that no one had expected even from him. One day the phoenix laid an egg. Not an ordinary one, not fiery in the usual sense, but an egg with a white golden shell inside which an unborn power could be felt. Seiji fell silent when he saw it. He understood, if this future beast was raised correctly, it would be possible to obtain not merely a phoenix, but a creature that would define an entire evolutionary branch. It was a chance to create a new legend from nothing. He placed an entire care system around the egg, a special temperature magical nourishment, a ritual of nightly protection, feeding vibrations a separate response zone for the future chick. And when the first cracks appeared across the shell, Seiji understood that a new era of his farm lay ahead. By that time, everyone already knew about Maximum Farm. Adventurers, guilds, aristocrats, officials, underground teams, and even palace services. Seiji was no longer ridiculous to anyone. He had transformed ordinary animals into legendary helpers. He had transformed a farm into an arsenal of living support. He had created a business where power was not taken away, but cultivated. And most importantly, he had proven, even the most ordinary creature could reach its maximum if it was given a chance, the correct path, and someone who would not betray it for profit. And even greater goals awaited him ahead. The First International Order, the creation of an elite animal line for the Empire, a battle with a competitor who decided to steal his system, and Perhaps the discovery of a completely new kind of evolution that no one had ever heard of before. And all of this had begun with a single chicken. The city of Lair turned out to be worse than Seiji had thought. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary trading hub. Towers, bridges, warehouses, markets, guild houses, the smell of bread and iron. But as soon as one came closer, it became clear the city was living at its limit. The walls were cracking under the burden of refugees from the east. Caravans had been disappearing on the roads for the second week, and every night a roar came from the northern forest belonging to something too large to be an ordinary beast. At first, the authorities tried to cope on their own. Then they called the guilds. Then they began paying adventurers. Then they stopped hiding their panic. And only then did they reach the heart of the matter. 2 underground rifts had opened beneath the city at once, and a pack of mutated predators had settled in one of them. They did not merely kill, they pushed people out of entire districts as water pushes air from a crack. Seiji did not arrive as a hero. He arrived as a person who had been asked to solve the problem after every other solution had already failed. At the city gates, he was met by a frightened official, several guards, and 3 adventurers with the faces of people who had already seen too many deaths. "Are you truly that farmer?" the official asked, making no attempt to hide his distrust. Seiji looked at the smoke in the distance. "If you are asking whether I know how to raise beasts, then yes. We need combat units. Then you are fortunate. I have brought exactly those who know how to survive where your fighters have already lost." Behind him stood Crow, the solar phoenix, 2 evolved scout foxes, and a large armored boar whose back resembled a living fortress wall. After seeing this, even the guards stopped whispering. Their obscene expectations ended right there at the gates. The city's plan was simple. The adventurers would clear the upper tunnels, the city guard would hold the perimeter, and Seiji would use his beast for reconnaissance and support. On paper, it looked reasonable. In practice, everything went wrong within an hour. One group disappeared in the southern mine, another retreated with losses, a third returned with torn armor and cries that there were not beasts down there, but something assembled from stone and living flesh. Seiji understood this was not merely a dungeon. It was evolutionary disorder. The rift saturated everything around it with unstable energy and transformed ordinary predators into grotesque, aggressive forms. "So they are evolving too," he said quietly. Crow raised his ears. The phoenix grew restless in the air. Seiji saw before him not only a threat, but also new material for research. If there is distorted evolution within the rift, then we must not merely destroy the monsters, but understand how their path was broken. "Good," he said. "Then we are going deeper." He took with him not the entire squad, but only the best. Crow as the forward sensory unit, 2 foxes as observers, the boar as a battering ram, the phoenix as a purifier and source of light, and 1 new beast, a black rabbit, that he had recently raised to the lightning guide stage. The rabbit proved incredibly useful. It sensed vibrations in the ground, noticed hidden traps, and could disrupt a mechanism at the right moment without exposing people to an attack. Together they descended into a dark tunnel where the walls were covered with a damp coating, and the air smelled of iron and something rotting. Soon the first attack began. A pack of long-bodied predators with bony ridges along their backs leaped from a side passage. Seiji did not allow the team to scatter. He ordered the phoenix to illuminate the corridor, the boar to move forward, and Crow to strike the flank. It was not chaos, it was calculation. The phoenix raised the temperature of the air. The predators slowed. The boar crashed into the center of the pack and broke the spines of 2 of them. Crow finished off those who tried to circle around. The foxes caught those who hid in the shadows. Seiji did not kill anyone himself. He commanded. And that was exactly where his strength lay. He did not merely possess beasts, he knew how to make them part of a single system. Deeper in the tunnels, they found not merely monsters, but traces of human interference. A furnace containing alchemical reagents, cages for beasts, inscribed circles for reinforced subjugation, broken amulets that had been used to forcibly tame mutated creatures. Seiji silently looked at all of it, and his expression grew colder and colder. Someone is assembling an army from this, he said. One of the adventurers accompanying them swallowed. You mean someone deliberately fed the rift? Yes, Seiji replied, and they did it not to protect the city. This discovery was worse than the monsters. Because a monster could be defeated, but a person who raised monsters for power was far more difficult to deal with. Farther on, the tunnel led them into an enormous underground hall, where Seiji saw something he would later remember for a long time and with disgust. An underground breeding facility. Dozens of cages stood there, and inside them were animals artificially distorted by foreign magic. Wolves with extra bony legs. Foxes with dull eyes. Birds that had rigid plates instead of wings. Boars with spikes covering their entire backs. All of it was alive, but broken. Seiji fell silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, "That is why the dungeon is expanding." The phoenix hissed and the flames on its wings intensified. Something inside one of the cages tried to stand. The beasts were not beyond saving. A spark still remained within them. That was what Seiji saw first, not deformity, but the remnant of a path. "Free them!" he ordered. The foxes immediately rushed toward the locks. The boar struck the central grate. Crow tore at a chain on the floor, and while the beasts were being freed, a man in a mask emerged from the distant passage. The mask was black but not ordinary. Magical veins were visible across it, distorting the light. The man spoke calmly, almost with curiosity. "So this is the famous evolutionist." Seiji did not move. "And you must be the one who turns living creatures into garbage." The stranger smirked. "I prefer the word renew. The world develops too slowly. I help it accelerate." Seiji understood that the man before him was not merely a madman. He was an ideologue. Someone who considered natural evolution insufficient and tried to push it into a filthy, violent form. "You force animals to change through pain," Seiji said. "And what do? Through food and care?" the man replied, mockingly. "Foolishness. Your methods are too slow, too gentle, too humanistic. In a world of power, that is weakness." Seiji looked at him calmly. "No, it is the only way to obtain a stable result." And at that moment, the battle began. The architect of the rift proved dangerous. He used not only magic, but also control over the distorted beasts. With one gesture, he forced the cages open and mutated creatures rushed at Seiji. But he was prepared. The phoenix rose higher, unfurled its solar flames, and burned away half the darkness in the hall. Crow attacked the architect himself, forcing him to retreat. The boar moved like a battering ram through the line of beasts. The foxes severed the seals binding the monsters. Seiji himself moved toward the center, summoning a new evolutionary wave within one of his animals directly in battle. It was a risk, but also an answer. The rabbit, which he had previously considered a scout, began glowing with a lightning aura. Its body lengthened, its eyes became brighter. It lunged forward, and only a second later its new form began intercepting the movements of the enemy creatures, predicting their trajectories. "Come on," Seiji said quietly. "Show what you can do." The rabbit became so fast that the people saw only a trail, and that was enough to break the enemy's rhythm. The architect took a step back. "You truly do this in battle?" "Of course," Seiji replied. "Good evolution should not stop because of circumstances." But while they fought below, disaster began in the city. The rift was not isolated, it was expanding. The ground cracked in the northern district. 2 streets began sinking. Panic poured into the market. People ran toward the gates, pushing one another. The city guard could not cope. Seiji, seeing this through his scouts, understood that they could not merely win inside the dungeon. They urgently needed to save the city. He ordered the boar and 2 foxes to return to the surface. The phoenix flew after them. He himself remained inside for several more minutes to destroy the breeding facility's control core. And when he returned to the surface, he saw a district that had almost collapsed. People screamed, stones fell, monsters burst from the cracks. At that moment, Seiji did something no one had expected. He did not wait for help. He used his beast as a rescue brigade. The boar held back the collapse, crashing into the stone supports and propping them up with its armored body. The foxes led children and wounded people along safe routes. Crow leaped across the rooftops and showed the way. The phoenix spread its fire not for attack, but to purify the air of poisonous spores. It was a sight that made the crowd freeze. It was then that the city understood. Seiji's beasts were not merely weapons. They were rescue infrastructure. But the rift continued to grow. That meant the core had not been destroyed. Seiji returned below, now genuinely angry. At the center of the breeding facility, he found a massive magical node through which the architect controlled the distortion. Destroying it was difficult. The core was built into an ancient stone structure, and the hall itself shook with energy. The architect lay wounded but was still laughing. "Too late," he hissed. "You will not stop the flow. I have already started the chain." "You are mistaken," Seiji replied. He looked at his animals. And then something happened that became one of the most famous moments in his history. He began a mass evolutionary stabilization. Not of one chicken, not of one dog, but of several beasts at once that stood nearby and had already been prepared for the transitional stage. A flow of power passed through his hands like a living current. Crow strengthened into a royal guardian. The phoenix rose to the apex of solar rebirth. The rabbit entered the spatial runner stage. The boar established itself as a stone bastion. The foxes became highest-level night guides. And together they struck the core. Cracks spread through the rift, then it split. Then it collapsed in on itself. When everything ended, the city stood stunned. Part of the districts had been destroyed, but most of the people had been saved precisely thanks to Seiji's animals. The adventurers who arrived too late were now greeted with applause because they helped with the evacuation. The guards, who had previously looked down on the farm, now bowed to his people. And Seiji himself stood amid the dust and fire, exhausted with a torn sleeve and a burn on his wrist, watching the phoenix soar above the city and illuminate the smoke. The official who had met him at the gates approached him. We did not expect you to save us in this way." Seiji smirked wearily. "I was not planning to save anyone in any particular way. I am simply doing my job." But he knew. After that night, his name would not disappear from history. The city officially declared Maximum Farm a strategic support facility. This meant not only new rights, but also new obligations. Seiji now received contracts for rescue missions, access to government land grants, the right to train city beast breeders according to his own system, and official protection from ordinary guild raids. It was a victory, but not the finale, because wherever there is a resounding victory, someone always appears who wants to steal it. And in Seiji's case, that someone was not one person. It was an entire network. A week after saving the city, alarming news reached him. Fake evolution farms had begun appearing in neighboring lands. Someone was trying to copy his system, but was doing so crudely through violence, accelerators, and rough magic. The result was predictable. The beasts broke, became aggressive, and unusable. Seiji saw this as more than mere plagiarism. It was a blow to his reputation. If people decided that the evolution method was dangerous, his business would collapse. And worse still, the conspirators would gain an excuse to declare his approach harmful to the world of beasts. He gathered documents, records, feed samples, and stabilization results. Then he traveled to the capital for a meeting with the Beast Development Council, where competitors and fake experts were already waiting for him. "Your method is too unrestricted," one of them declared. "We believe that animals need strict boundaries." Seiji looked at him calmly. "You mean that crippling them is easier for you than raising them?" The hall tensed. "Your accusations?" "Not accusations, a fact. All your enhancement programs produce unstable beasts. Mine live, return, and continue developing." He placed the latest reports from the rescued city on the table. "Here is a result that you will not be able to falsify." To settle the dispute once and for all, the council proposed a tournament. 3 days, 3 trials, 3 types of tasks: combat rating, rescue efficiency, beast control, and development. Seiji accepted the challenge immediately. This tournament was supposed to determine who would become the main supplier of animals for the following year's Imperial missions. The competitors entered the arena, each with their own miracle beasts. Predatory lions, pseudo-dragons, armored dogs, and enhanced griffins. Everything looked expensive and impressive. Seiji brought out the phoenix crow, the lightning rabbit, and a young fox that had not yet reached its peak, but was already incredibly useful. The first trial battle against waves of monsters. Crow and the phoenix brought him into the lead almost immediately. The second evacuation from a collapsed structure. The bastion boar performed best here, the third passage through a labyrinth of traps. The foxes and the rabbit shone here. The victory was so obvious that even his enemies could not dispute it. And yet the most important event happened after the tournament. After the final, a representative of the Imperial Court approached Seiji. "Your method has been recognized as nationally significant," he said. "The Empire is offering you the opportunity to open a branch in the capital. Full support, funding, a license." It was an incredible step, but Seiji was in no hurry to rejoice. And what are the conditions? The representative did not evade the question. "We want to standardize some of your procedures." Seiji shook his head. "Then it would no longer be my system. My beasts are not a production line. Are you refusing? I am offering a compromise. You receive training, documentation, and quality control. But raising, development, and personal contracts remain under my control." The envoy looked at him for a long time and then nodded. Because it was already clear Seiji had grown too powerful to be simply bought. When he returned to the farm, the sun was setting behind the hills, and the beasts were waiting for him in the open grounds. The phoenix sat on a high perch like a small, fiery king. Crow lay at the entrance to the house. The rabbit raced across the field, leaving brief flashes of light behind it. The foxes watched from the edge of the shadows. The boar slept like a rock. Seiji looked at them and, for the first time in a long while, smiled, not with a businesslike smile, but sincerely. He remembered how it had all begun, with one weak chicken, one skill, and the desire not to sell power but to cultivate it. Now he had a system, a business, a reputation, people, and animals that were changing the world. But even more lay ahead, because legendary beasts from the ancient forests had begun appearing on the Empire's border, and someone was already whispering that Maximum Farm would have to open a line for creatures that even ordinary guilds were afraid to touch. Seiji understood. This would be the next level, and he was ready. At first, the war came not with an army, but with a letter. A sealed scroll from the capital was delivered to Maximum Farm. Inside was an official notice. The western border had been attacked by unknown creatures, caravans were disappearing, and 2 border cities were preparing for evacuation. The Empire was not merely asking for help, it was effectively demanding immediate intervention. And between the lines, Seiji immediately saw what others had failed to notice. The wording was too cold, almost like that of people who already knew that everything would end badly. He raised the letter toward the light, then slowly rolled it up. "This is not an ordinary breach," he said. Seiji stood in his main courtyard while the beasts were already gathering around him. Crow silent, tense. The solar phoenix with fire shimmering through its feathers. The resonator rabbit nervously tapping its paw against the stone. The foxes quiet as shadows. The bastion boar heavy, motionless, almost like a living fortress. He regarded them not as property, but as a team. And that was the meaning of his power. He did not merely raise beasts. He created a structure in which everyone knew their place. "We are assembling," he said. "We are going west." Thus began the story in which Maximum Farm went beyond business for the first time and became a factor in war. The journey to the western border took 4 days. Along the way, they saw burned villages, abandoned wagons, and signs of panicked flight. But something else was worst of all. Traces of alien evolution were spreading across the fields. The animals there had not merely mutated, someone had deliberately broken them, forcing them to develop into aggressive forms. Seiji walked in silence until he saw a dead deer with distorted antlers. He lowered himself onto one knee beside it. "This is not natural," he said quietly. Crow growled slightly. The scout fox touched its nose to the ground and sharply recoiled. Seiji understood. Someone had begun using the same principle as him, but without care, without proper nutrition, without understanding the path. Only crude evolutionary overload. The animal was forced to grow faster than it could endure, and the result became a weapon that suffered from its own existence. This thought angered him more than he had expected, because to him, evolution was not violence. It was care directed into strength, and it was precisely this difference that he intended to show everyone. On the second day of the journey, a pack of distorted wolves caught up with them. They were twice the size of ordinary beasts with twisted limbs and overly long jaws. Their eyes glowed a murky red, and their movements were uneven, as though a foreign will were constantly pushing them forward. Seiji did not allow the team to scatter. Fox's left flank, Crow center, Rabbit reconnaissance and rhythm disruption. Phoenix, do not burn the entire pack, only blind them. Boar, hold the line. He spoke quickly but without panic, and the beasts reacted instantly. The foxes slipped into the shadows and began tearing apart the wolves on their approach, preventing them from surrounding the group. Crow intercepted one of the pack leaders, knocked it into the mud, and tore out its throat with one precise strike. The rabbit darted between the monster's paws, changing their trajectories at the most inconvenient moment. The boar took the impact of two beasts at once and simply did not move from its place. The phoenix rose into the air and flared not with destructive fire, but with blinding heat that caused the wolves to lose coordination. It was a short battle, but a very revealing one. Seiji watched his beasts work like a single organism and understood. Now he had not merely a farm, but a complete combat division. And if the Empire wanted to use him as a weapon, it would have to take into account that he shaped this weapon himself. Laven greeted them with silence. The city had been partially evacuated, the streets were deserted, and the gates were reinforced with wooden barricades. Several tents with wounded people stood in the center, and the entire air was saturated with a mixture of smoke, blood, and medicinal herbs. The garrison commander met Seiji with the expression of someone who no longer believed in salvation. "You are too late," he said. Seiji looked at him calmly. "As long as the city still stands, I am not too late." The commander wanted to object, but then he saw the beasts, and especially the phoenix. A faint hope flashed in the man's eyes, one that he had probably not allowed himself to feel for a long time. Seiji immediately went to inspect the problem. What he saw beyond the walls was worse than an attack. Large beasts with alien evolutionary deformities wandered through the dark valley below. There were many of them. Too many. And all of them were moving toward the city as though someone were guiding them along a single line. "They are not random," Seiji said. "They are being driven." The commander clenched his fists. "By whom?" "That is what I intend to find out." At night, Seiji descended into the old stormwater tunnels together with Crow and one of the foxes. It was there that he discovered the source of the problem, an underground network of seals built beneath the city many years earlier. Someone had reactivated them to lure beasts from the valley and distort their evolution. There was a symbol on the stone, a black circle, 3 prongs, and a line resembling a rift. It was the mark of an organization he had already heard about through indirect hints. Not merely thieves of his method, not merely competitors. Something far worse, people who believed that beasts should evolve through pain, not through care. Their ideology was like a disease. If given time, it infected an entire system. Seiji ran his hand over the symbol. "So you are the ones who started all of this." The fox became alert. Crow growled quietly. Something moved in the depths of the tunnel. At first, Seiji thought it was another distorted predator. But when a creature with glowing eyes and armor seemingly woven from the bones of other beasts emerged from the darkness, he understood this was no longer merely an animal. It was an assembled beast, not evolution. Assembly, and it was disgusting. The assembled beast attacked first. Crow moved aside, the fox rushed after him, and Seiji barely managed to activate a defensive impulse. The impact threw him against the tunnel wall, but he remained standing. The monster was powerful. The strength of several species had been mixed within it. The speed of a predator, the toughness of a boar, the flexibility of a snake, and the claws of a bird. But it lacked the most important thing, integrity. It moved in jerks like a machine assembled from foreign, incompatible parts. Seiji understood that he would defeat it not with brute force, but with proper counter-evolution. "Crow, pressure from the left!" he shouted. "Fox, show me the weak points. I will restructure it." Crow lunged forward, distracting the monster. The fox began running in an arc, forcing the creature to turn its head at an inconvenient moment. Seiji pulled a compact feeding crystal from his bag and, directly in battle, launched an evolutionary impulse into one of his reserve beasts, a young badger scout that he had brought into the dungeon in case of unforeseen circumstances. The badger underwent a rapid transformation and became an earth stabilizer, a beast whose power lay in breaking foreign, unstable magic. It crashed into the floor beneath the assembled beast. The monster lost coordination, and then Seiji made the final move. The phoenix struck with light from above. Crow went for the throat. The fox severed the seal on its back. The badger broke the energy supply from below. The assembled beast collapsed. After the battle, Seiji finally reached the central chamber of the tunnels. There, inside a hidden hall, he found the meeting place of those who had created the network of distorted beasts. Letters, maps, lists of cities and routes marked as testing zones. Seiji stood motionless. This means, he said quietly, that they were not testing this in the wildlands. They were testing it on people. The garrison commander standing beside him turned pale. A large map of the Western Territories hung on the wall, and dozens of points were marked on it. Not merely places of attack, places where preparations for the next wave were already underway. If the city of Levin fell, the rift would open farther, and then the entire western route would be set ablaze. Seiji understood that he had encountered a professional sabotage system. And then, for the first time, a thought came to him. What if they wanted to drag his farm not merely into the market, but into a war between entire factions? When night turned into the hour before dawn, the western wall of the city began to collapse. Weakened by undermining, it could not withstand the beast's assault and fell onto one of the outer districts. There were families, craftsmen, warehouses, and a medical station inside. Seiji did not wait for an order. He rushed to the site together with the phoenix and the boar. The phoenix rose high and created a ring of fire that illuminated the collapse. The boar stood beneath the falling section and held it up with its back. Crow and the fox led people through the side passages. Seiji cleared away stones with his hands and magic until he found a child beneath the rubble. A little girl pinned beneath wooden boards looked at him in fear. "Do not be afraid," he said. "We will get you out." He carefully moved the stone aside without damaging the structure more than necessary. The phoenix heated the metal so it would not press against the girl. Crow drove back the panicked crowd. The fox found the shortest way out. And when they emerged, the city saw for the first time that Seiji's farm was not only a business. It was a rescue tool that worked faster than an army. But the celebration did not last long. By morning, official representatives of one of the capital's beast-breeding guilds arrived in Levin. They declared that they were ready to help with the restoration, but their tone was too polite to be sincere. Seiji immediately understood. These were the same people who had tried to discredit his method. They had not come to help. They had come to make sure that his farm would not become too influential after saving the city. "We heard that you used unstable beast forms," one of them said, choosing his words too carefully. "This may raise questions in the capital." Seiji looked at him coldly. Questions can only be asked by those who want not to help, but to seize. "You are mistaken." "No, I have already seen how you operate." Crow raised his head. The phoenix spread its wings. The boar stood beside him like a living wall. Seiji did not threaten them, but everyone understood. If they tried to steal or buy out his system, he would not yield. And so the representatives from the capital were forced to retreat, although they maintained the disguise of politeness. A few days later, Seiji received another letter. This time, it was on an entirely different level. The letter stated that in 2 months, the International Circle of Continents would take place in the capital, a gathering of beast breeders, researchers, and suppliers of combat animals from several nations. There they would choose who would become the official supplier for the following year's border campaigns. and Seiji's name had already been added to the list of invitees. It was not merely recognition. It was entry onto the international stage. But together with the invitation came a warning. Some participants already considered him a dangerous competitor and would try to sabotage his presentation. Seiji finished reading the letter and quietly smirked. So, finally, a serious stage. Crow tilted his head slightly. The phoenix flared brighter. New preparations began at Maximum Farm. Over the following weeks, the Seiji worked like a man possessed. He did not want to attend the International Forum with a beautiful demonstration merely for show. He wanted to present an entire development line capable of changing the industry. Therefore, he prepared a new scout for urban operations, an enhanced line of healing sheep, high-class combat dogs, compact aerial companions, and an improved version of the Phoenix capable of healing allies with gentle fire. In addition, he decided to present something special, an intermediate evolutionary map where viewers would see not only the beast's final form, but its entire path of growth. It could change the market forever, but it could also place him under attack, because as soon as people understood that Seiji could systematically repeat a miracle, their greed would become even more dangerous. He saw the capital in the rain. The city was enormous, noisy, and filled with stone facades, golden emblems, and endless wagons carrying goods. Flags for the International Circle of Continents were already hanging throughout the streets. Hundreds of delegations were arriving from all over the world. Seiji traveled along the main road and felt that he was being watched. It was not surprising. What awaited him was not merely a tournament, it was a global-scale market. At the gates, official coordinators met him and almost immediately began asking too many questions. Where is the license? What access level? Who vouched for him is there? Confirmation of animal stability. How many contracts? How safe are his forms? Seiji answered briefly and calmly. Then he showed them the documents from rescued Levon. There were fewer questions after that, because when you have a rescued city behind you, arguing with you becomes more difficult. The forum's main hall was an enormous area filled with cages, alchemical circles, demonstration arenas, and rows of observers. Seated there were beast breeders from the northern kingdoms, bloodline mages, imperial advisors, trade delegations, and several people whom Seiji immediately disliked. Because they were not looking at the beasts, they were looking at how they could be used. A master from the Eastern Union performed first. He brought out a dragon-like lizard. Then the northerners presented combat polar bears. Then the southern delegation's swift-horned horses. And then Seiji stepped forward. With him were Crow the phoenix, the rabbit, the fox, the boar, and one small creature from a new cycle, still almost unknown to the public. The hall filled with murmurs. Are these his best specimens? Too few. Where are the legendary beasts? Did he come with a farmer's collection? Seiji did not answer. He simply placed the beast in the arena and began showing the evolutionary process. Not instantaneous, sequential. Step by step. Every transition was accompanied by an explanation, training, nutrition, targeted exertion, and magical stabilization. The audience watched and gradually fell silent. Because it was no longer a show, it was science transformed into spectacle. As soon as Seiji reached the Phoenix demonstration, something happened that he had expected from the very beginning. One of the spectators tried to disrupt the ritual. A magical impulse struck the hall. The lamps went out. Hidden seals activated. Several unknown beasts wearing collars rushed into the arena. It was not random chaos. It was an attempt on his public reputation. But Seiji did not lose his composure. Crow defense. Fox break the seals. Rabbit disrupt trajectories. Boar front. Phoenix do not attack people. Light only. His commands flew clearly without unnecessary words. And the beasts worked perfectly. Crow blocked the attack. The fox quickly found the source of the magical binding. The rabbit disrupted the enemy creature's coordination so that they began crashing into one another. The boar held the front. The phoenix flooded the arena with pure light that did not harm the spectators but blinded the attackers. Seiji reached the hidden mage controlling the sabotage in a leap and literally knocked the control artifact from his hands. The hall erupted with cries. Then silence fell. And within that silence, it became clear. Seiji did not merely know how to raise beasts. He knew how to keep even a catastrophe created against him under control. After the incident, the forum was temporarily suspended. But it was during this break that a man in a dark blue uniform without identifying marks approached Seiji. He introduced himself as a representative of the Frontline Commission. "Your beasts could change the course of future campaigns," he said. "The Empire is interested in using them on a mass scale." Seiji immediately understood where the conversation was heading. "You want to put my farm on a military footing. We want victory." "No," he replied. "You want to turn my beast into expendable material." The man did not argue. "In that case, you understand that you will be offered power, not a choice." Seiji looked at him coldly. "Then tell your masters. If they want to use Maximum Farm, they will have to accept my rules. Beasts are not disposable tools, and if anyone tries to turn my system into a factory of war, I will leave and take it with me." It was a harsh answer, but exactly the one that was needed, because only after that did it become clear. Seiji was not a supplier of power. He was its independent center. And then, at the very end of the forum, something happened that no one had planned. The small creature that Seiji had brought as part of the demonstration of a future branch unexpectedly began to glow. It was almost unnoticeable, something between a bird and a small beast, with soft gray golden feathers and tiny claws. Many considered it merely a cute experiment, but in the presence of foreign ambition and aggression, it began reaching a new level. First, its wings were enveloped in light. Then its eyes became amber. Then the air around it began to ring. Seiji froze. "No, you were not supposed to yet." But the creature was already undergoing the transition. It was not transforming into a standard legendary form. It was opening a new branch, and the hall saw something no one had expected, a result not only of cultivation, but of the correct environment. A beast that had grown not in fear and pressure, but in care and balance, proved capable of evolving beyond ordinary scales. It was a discovery capable of overturning the entire industry. For the first time, Seiji did not smile victoriously. He simply understood. Things would become even more difficult from this point onward, because now a true hunt for his method would begin. After the forum, they no longer merely tried to discredit him. Now they tried to study, copy, buy, and steal him. Delegations offered deals. Scientists requested access to the beasts. And one secretive group, as it turned out, began collecting information about his feeding plans, training routines, and magical stabilizers. Seiji understood his farm had become an object of international interest, and therefore he needed to act more firmly. He strengthened security, divided production, sealed part of the archives, created false evolutionary lines that were not dangerous but confused observers. And at the same time, he began developing his main project, a regional evolution center that was supposed to become not merely a farm, but a school and a network. He wanted more than simply being able to raise beasts to their maximum himself. He wanted the method to become available to those who knew how to respect life. This was the next stage. But in a world of high stakes, one could not remain merely a peaceful innovator. While he was returning to the farm, the first attacks had already begun on the border. Fake evolution farms using violent methods began challenging his systems. Training grounds were destroyed. Animals were abducted. One of the Western supply stations was raided. This was no longer competition. It was a war over the direction of the future. Seiji stood on a hill, looking at the smoke in the distance, and felt cold determination growing within him. "So that is how it is," he said quietly. "If they want a war over beasts, I will show them what happens when beasts are raised properly." Crow raised his head. The phoenix flared. The rabbit struck the ground with its paw. Maximum Farm was assembling once again, not as an agricultural operation, but as an army of life. And now, this was no longer the story of a farmer who wanted to make money. It was the story of a man who created a new way to develop power, and now had to protect it from those accustomed to building the world on pain. The war began not with an official declaration, but with a nighttime fire on the southern road. First, a caravan carrying feed for healing beasts burned. Then 3 liaison squads disappeared. After that, distorted beasts appeared on the border with the neighboring principality, bred too crudely, too quickly, too cruelly. They were led by people in masks, and some of their collars bore the marks of foreign guilds and signatures from forged contracts. Seiji did not learn about it from the newspapers. His foxes were the first to bring the scent of burning and blood. Then Crow, raising his muzzle toward the wind, growled the way only a beast sensing a threat to its pack would growl. The phoenix in the sky rose higher, brighter, more anxious. Even the bastion boar, usually calm, shifted nervously on its hooves. "They have begun," Seiji said. He did not say it as a threat, he said it as a diagnosis. The night was short. The alarm was raised on the farm, but not chaotically, rather according to a well-practiced procedure. Some of the beasts went into protective pens, some took up training positions, while the combat forms ready to depart received enhanced feed and a brief stabilization impulse. Seiji did not like panic. He considered panic a luxury for those unprepared to act. "Assemble in 10 minutes," he said. "We take only those capable of enduring the journey and the battle." Thus began his first true campaign against a foreign beast network. The western road along which they traveled was empty. Strangely empty. Not abandoned, but deliberately cleared. As though someone had removed unnecessary traces in advance to conceal the route. Seiji immediately understood that the enemy already knew about his advance and was trying to lure him into a narrow passage between the hills. He stopped the squad. "An ambush ahead," he said briefly. One of the Imperial guides hired to accompany them could not hold back. "How do you know?" Seiji pointed to the grass. The line where it has been pressed down is too even. That means beasts passed through here recently, but they were deliberately led back out to leave a false corridor. And there is also the smell. Too much iron and too little natural earth. The guide blinked. "You sensed that?" "Yes." And that alone was enough for the people around him to begin looking at him completely differently. A few minutes later, an attack truly erupted beyond the hill. Linked pseudo-predators burst from the ground, while crossbowmen struck from above. But Seiji did not allow them to coordinate their strike. Crow lunged to the left, tearing apart the flank. The fox concealed the squad's movement. The boar crashed into the center of the ambush and broke their formation. The phoenix illuminated the sky with fire, and the shooters began missing. The rabbit made a brief dash, destroying the connecting seals. The ambush ended in 3 minutes. The remaining attackers tried to retreat, but Seiji did not immediately pursue them. He asked the beast to sniff the bodies, the masks, the metal. He needed not a trophy, but a trail. And the trail led him to one of the old trade routes where warehouses of unregistered beast equipment had once been located. "So you are not operating from the forest," he said quietly. "You are here nearby." The factory was located beneath an abandoned mill by the river. On the outside, ordinary walls, old poles, a half-collapsed roof. Inside, an entire system of cages, magical pathways, inscribed circles, and vats of foul-smelling reagents. Beasts were kept there and forced to evolve through pain, hunger, and repeated injuries. Seiji froze in the doorway. His face became icy. It was worse than the breeding facility beneath Lavon. At least there had been a hidden rift there. Here, however, there was a business, a conveyor belt, production. Records lay on the tables. Mutation speed, pain, resistance, aggression by stages, tolerance to blood-based substances, reaction to forced growth. He leafed through the papers, and with every page his gaze became emptier. "They do not raise beasts," he said. "They smelt them like metal." Crow growled quietly. The phoenix rose higher. The fox pressed itself against Seiji's leg, but not from fear, from rage. In the distant room, they found animals that were still alive. Several were unconscious. 2 were already on the verge of death. One was a young dog whose magical channels had begun internally splitting apart instead of undergoing normal evolution. Seiji knelt beside him and immediately understood. If he did not intervene, the beast would die. He used his skill, not increasing its strength, not accelerating it, but stabilizing it. It was a rare case when Seiji used evolution not for advancement, but to restore a path. He returned the damaged line to the beast, balanced its internal state, and removed the parasitic magic. The dog slowly opened his eyes and then, for the first time in a long while, moved his tail. Seiji exhaled. Still alive. That means he can be saved. The underground factory gave him more than evidence. In the basement, inside a separate room, he found the person who managed the entire operation. Not the leader, no. The one who served as the link between the market, the forged contracts, and the beast chains. The man did not flinch when he saw Seiji. Too late, he said. No, Seiji replied. As long as you are alive, it is not too late. The man smirked. Do you still think your care can defeat the market of power? I have already defeated the market of fear, Seiji said. Only those afraid of losing their profits remain. The man pulled a small crystal from his pocket and squeezed it. Magic immediately began trembling around the factory. You do not understand, he whispered. We were not merely copying your system. We found those who want more. Those who want to direct beast evolution toward a war of continents. You have already been noticed. Seiji lunged forward, but the man managed to destroy the crystal. The explosion tore away part of the wall and extinguished the lamps. When the smoke cleared, the man was already gone. Only an empty room remained, along with several pages bearing symbols that Seiji had already seen in old documents inside the broken stone dungeon. So this was not an isolated network, it was part of a large organization, and it truly was preparing for something enormous. Seiji did not immediately pursue the fugitive. First, he tended to those he had found inside the factory. It was an important moment for him personally because here, among the half-dead animals, he was finally testing his path. Raising a normal beast was one thing. Saving a crippled one was entirely different. He distributed the rescued animals among temporary stalls, gave them clean water, soft food, herbal mixtures, and warm rest. Then he began doing what he knew best, returning them to normal evolution. The dog he had rescued first passed through a new stage. From a battered, exhausted beast, he became a strong, attentive companion with heightened sensitivity to magical traps. His eyes became clear, his fur smooth, his movements composed. Seiji named him Rem. Then he began tending to another animal, a small owl whose wing had been broken and whose magical channels had been drained. After stabilization, the owl transformed into a nocturnal observer, capable of seeing energy lines in the darkness. It was the perfect scout for sieges and urban operations. Next came an old mountain goat whose bones had already been twisted by forced evolution. Seiji literally straightened its path back out and then raised it to the level of a stone guardian. The foxes watched all of this silently. They already knew their master was not merely strong, he knew how to restore dignity to beasts. After returning to the farm, Seiji gathered all the documents and spread them across a long table. Seated before him were the captain of the city garrison, an official inspector from the capital, several trusted beast breeders, and a representative of the Imperial Commission. These are no longer local bandits, he said. This is a coordinated network. Their goal is the forced standardization of beast evolution. They want to prove that my method is weak because it is slow, but in reality, their method destroys the very foundation. The inspector frowned. Are you claiming that they are deliberately creating unstable beasts? I am not claiming it. I am showing it. And he laid out the data. All the distorted beasts had the same set of damage traces, all had been subjected to aggressive growth accelerators, all had the same magical nourishment pattern, all bore the same symbols on their collars and seals. The garrison captain turned pale. If this gets out, it is already getting out, Seiji replied. And if we do not strike first, these people will unleash a war of beasts across the entire continent. That was when the decision of true scale began. The Empire could no longer ignore him. Maximum Farm became not merely a business or a phenomenon. It transformed into a strategic center that had to be either supported or destroyed. A month after the factory was crushed, the strike came from another direction. Not against the borders, against his reputation. Articles began appearing in the capital's publications. Seiji's beasts are dangerous, his system is unstable. He creates emotional dependency among customers. His methods are supposedly unsuitable for the army, and the farm is a private monopolistic project capable of collapsing the market. Seiji read all of it without much reaction, but understood. These were not random articles. It was a media attack paid for by those who had failed to buy him. He gathered his people. "They want us to be considered dangerous," he said. "Then we will show them the opposite." He organized a series of public demonstrations. Rescue missions, treatment of wounded beasts, testing the reliability of animals on missions, joint work with local doctors, and guards free training for village beast breeders. The people saw Maximum Farm in action, not through rumors, and the rumors began to break apart. Because propaganda works poorly against the fact that beasts return alive and help people. And then came news that once again changed the scale. In the north, a beast appeared that hunters called the Stone Lion. It was an ancient creature considered almost legendary. It did not attack villages, but it blocked the mountain passes and disrupted trade. Several teams attempted to kill it and were defeated. They came to Seiji with a request, not to kill it, not to capture it, but to tame it. It was a challenge for him. Because legendary beasts do not always follow an ordinary evolutionary ladder. Sometimes they have already reached a peak. Sometimes it is necessary not to strengthen them, but to reveal a hidden path. Seiji took only Crow, the Phoenix, the Fox, and Rem with him. They climbed toward the northern cliffs, where the air was thin and cold. There, among stone arches, he saw the lion enormous, covered in plates like armor. It was not evil, merely ancient. It guarded the territory because its instincts told it to do so. Seiji did not attack immediately. He began with respect. He gave the lion water, then meat, then nectar made from rare herbs. Then he removed the magical threat surrounding the territory, clearing away the traps left by people who had previously tried to lure it out. The lion did not approach, but it no longer growled. Seiji felt he could go further. He used his skill not for forced transformation, but to reveal the hidden root of its bloodline. And then the stone fur along the lion's back began to glow, while the plates moved as though alive. It was not a new beast form, it was an awakened royal branch of the Stone Guardians. The lion raised its head and, for the first time, looked at Seiji not as an enemy, but as an equal. After the stone lion returned, the farm gained more than fame. It gained the status of a place capable of working even with legendary creatures. This opened an entirely different market: contracts with the army, border fortresses, research orders, and temple missions. But together with this came a new risk. The higher he rose, the greater the pressure became, and the more obvious it was that someone above wanted either to subjugate his system or destroy it before it was too late. Seiji sensed that the climax was near, and it came sooner than expected. One morning, the capital received an alarm signal. Controlled packs of distorted beasts were advancing toward the walls from several directions. It looked like a coordinated attack, not a random breach, a siege. People screamed. The guards formed barriers. Mages prepared protective circles, and news was already spreading through the streets with frightening speed. It was at that moment that Seiji was urgently summoned. "We need all your beasts," the Imperial envoy said. "Now!" Seiji looked at the map. "No," he replied. "You do not need all of them. You need the correct formation." He quickly distributed the forces. Rem for traps and locating vulnerabilities, Crow for intercepting the flanks, Phoenix for aerial defense, the Night Tracker Fox for hunting the controlling seals, the Stone Lion as the holding center, the Boar as the breaching shield. And when the attack began, it was his system that held the first strike. Crow and the Lion shattered the main assaults. The Phoenix cleared the sky of poisonous creatures. The Boar held the breaches in the lower districts. The Fox located magical nodes on the walls and transmitted their coordinates. Rem singled out those beasts that were not yet completely lost and led them aside so they could be saved rather than merely killed. It was not simply the defense of the capital. It was proof that evolution without violence was stronger than the rigid assembly of another person's will. Seiji quickly understood that the packs were being controlled from the city center. That meant the siege was only a distraction. The true strike was supposed to target the palace complex or the central repository of beast contracts. He did not hesitate. Fox with me. Crow, cover the retreat. Phoenix, hold the air. Stone Lion, do not let them break into the gate district. And he moved toward the center. Beneath the streets of the capital was an old canal. There he found the source of control, an enormous ritual node connected to hundreds of seals. People in masks stood beside it, and among them was the one Seiji had seen before, the architect of the rift. But now he was not hiding. "You are causing a great deal of trouble," he said. Seiji replied without emotion, "And you have spent too long believing that pain is development. Pain is development, if there is enough of it." Seiji shook his head. "No. Pain is damage if you do not know how to heal it." And they clashed. This time, the battle was not merely against a man. It was a conflict between two ideologies. The architect of the rift tried to activate the node and break the flow of beasts throughout the city, turning them into a single striking resource. Seiji, meanwhile, tried to shut down the node without destroying the beast that could still be saved. At one point, the enemy forces nearly broke through the defenses. Then Seiji took a desperate step. He activated mass synchronization among his beasts at the level of temporary combat unity. Crow, the lion, the phoenix, Rem, the fox, and the boar became one system for a moment. One speed, one fire, one durability, one search, one stabilization, one defense. It was not merely a squad. It was a living evolutionary mechanism. And it crushed the node. The inscribed lines shattered. Control over the packs collapsed. The siege began falling apart. And for the first time that night, the people on the walls understood that the capital had been saved not by walls, but by beasts raised without cruelty. The morning after the siege was strangely quiet. Traces of battle lay across the streets, but the city had endured. The evacuation was stopped. The trading districts were saved. The palace archives were unharmed, and even many distorted beasts were brought out of their state of combat madness and sent for treatment. Maximum Farm emerged from that night not merely a live legendary. The Imperial Council could no longer pretend that Seiji was an ordinary farmer with a fortunate skill. He was now a man who saved several cities, disrupted several underground networks, developed a new model of beast service, defended the capital from a siege, and proved that care could be stronger than violence. But Seiji did not celebrate for long, because among the captured documents he found the true symbol, not of a guild, not of an individual clan, but of the Union of Unstable Evolution, an international organization that wanted to subordinate the evolutionary paths of beasts to war. Their next step was already clear: war across the continent. Seiji sat late at night at the edge of the farm, looking at the lights in the distance. Crow lay beside him. The phoenix slept on a high perch. The fox curled up at his feet. The stone lion breathed heavily but calmly. Rem guarded the boundary of the property. He thought neither about rewards nor fame. He thought about the fact that his method no longer belonged only to him. It had become more important than he was, and that meant people would fight for it, and not always honestly. He understood that what lay ahead was greater than a city, greater than a border, greater than an empire. Now he had to decide: protect his system or transform it into the foundation of a new world where beasts were not broken for the sake of power. He slowly rose. "So that is how it is," he said quietly. "If they want a war of beasts, I will show them evolution that saves." Crow raised his head. The phoenix spread its fiery wings. And the night above Maximum Farm once again became the beginning of a new arc.